Zsófia Herendi is a product manager who spent more than 17 years bringing developers and business people together, and over 11 years working on different teams in an agile environment. And Nick Toon works with technology leaders at each flight level to architect businesses and software. Please welcome to the stage, Nick and Zsófia.
Thank you.
It's going to get hot in here. I can tell. I was in here for a hands-on yesterday, and it got quite warm with half this number of people. So what do you think? Any tips for keeping cool in this session? Or
Pretty much the palinka, right?
Oh, we forgot the palinka.
We forgot the palinka. Yeah.
All right, so got a bit of a flicker here, but don't worry about that. We're not going to be using the slides too much. This is going to be a hands-on session today. I would recommend finding a table. It's probably not going to be that easy. So we want 6 people at a table. So there's still a few seats down here, a couple here, maybe 3 or 4 people who are at the back who want to get involved. If you're at the back, if you're sitting down not at a table,
One more people here.
it will be possible to take part today. It just might be a bit more difficult, but let's figure things out as we go along. Sophie, do you want to tell them about yourself?
Sure. Introduction-wise, it was pretty much everything what Alex said, but actually it's worth to mention that basically, besides my regular product management role, I really like to help and facilitate teams, development teams, to collaboratively explore and discover the complex domain they are working with. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. And I really like Nutella. And palinka as well, but it's Nick's specialty.
Yeah, definitely. Probably had, shall I go through all of them? Apricot, elderflower,
Pear.
quince, pear, raspberry, lemon, and ginger. I've had at least 6 palinkas this week, so it's all good. Not much more to say about me, really, apart from the intro. One thing I would say, though, is at this conference, I think it was 6 years ago, in 2016 or 2017, maybe 5 years ago, I was doing a domain-driven design workshop, and I met Zsófia, who was one of the attendees in that workshop. And then after the workshop, she was asking me loads of questions. We were talking about ideas. So, in this room today, you might find someone who you keep in contact with and share ideas with. So, yeah, definitely try and put yourself in a group with some people you don't know. Something magical could happen. So, we've got a structure for today, starting with event storming to learn the domain. We're then going to look at some slicing up the domain using techniques from DDD. And then finally, we're going to look at team topologies. So in this process, in your organizations, mapping out your business, identifying areas of your business, and then working out, are these domains and subdomains you've identified, does it make sense to organize our teams around those, or do we need to make some refinements to those? And it's all going to be hands-on, not too much theory.
Yeah. It comes to the Miro board we are going to use, but basically you just need the Miro board for reading the prepared domain we just prepared for you. So feel free to actually read the QR, or just by the link you can open up the Miro board if you want to read within your team the prepared material we will show you later. But feel free to use the physical post-its, which can be enjoyable after COVID, 2 years COVID, I think. So there are physical post-its there prepared, so you can work with those. But actually, you will just need the Miro for reading the prepared material and stuff like that. But we are going to share that here as well. So if you don't or cannot open the Miro board, don't worry. It will be here shared as well.
Yeah, I would say if you've got a laptop or a tablet, that would be ideal. It will be possible with your phone as well. And we'll keep it up on here as much as possible to make it easy for you as we go along. Just give you a couple of moments to access the link or the QR code. Is anyone having any problems with this? Has anyone actually accessed the Miro board yet? OK, so the URL and password do work. Just wait for a couple more seconds.
There is a tip. If you experience performance issues, maybe you want to hide the collaborators' cursors, and then it will be quicker and easier to load in.
Yeah, if anyone's looking for a table, a seat here and a seat here, if you want to come to one of the tables. All right, shall we?
Can we move on from this slide? Okay.
So, as we talked about briefly, I'm going to be working in groups today, ideally with some strangers to make some friends. I came to a great session here yesterday. We played some card games with strangers, had a lot of fun. Hopefully we can recreate some of that in today's session.
Still some spots here in the front row, actually.
Could you unhide that frame,
Yep,
please?
Sure. Not sure.
Oh, I
You
need
know.
to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because of the.
This is the first time doing this in person, so there's a few things we haven't quite perfected yet. But basically, we have a check-in for you. So I'm going to set a timer for 5 minutes. And in your tables, just to get to know the people you're working with, and if you're not at a table, try and organize yourselves into groups of 4 if there's any room for maneuverability at the back there. And just answer this question. What was the best workshop you've ever been to and why? And the timer is starting now. All right, that timer is up. Before we move on, would anyone like to share anything interesting about yourself or that you learned about someone else? No, I thought so. Let's move on then. All right, so today we're going to be working in an example domain we put together for you. And the company is called Tomati. I don't remember these words on the slides. I'm going to have to turn and read them. Tomati is the quickest, eco-friendliest, and most enjoyable way to order food and get it delivered to your home. Basically, online grocery. You download the app on your smartphone, or go to the website, order some groceries, whatever food you like to buy. And that's the kind of company we're talking about. So, Sophie, would you like to tell us what we're going to do with this company?
Sure, happy to. So we prepared the domain, the online grocery shopping domain for you today in an event storming format. Event storming is basically a flexible workshop format for collaboratively modeling and collaboratively discovering complex business domains with your teams. This is basically what you will be able to see on the prepared domain, on the prepared event storm board as well. So basically, events on the orange stickies. Events are events that are relevant for a domain expert in that particular domain area. So events are in past tense. Like this is an example event storming kind of. So we woke up today, right? Drank coffee and arrived at craft. Pretty easy. So these are the things happened in a timeline if we are looking at our day-to-day. Also, you will be able to see pink stickies and purple stickies on the prepared board as well. Pink stickies are for systems and apps, and also not just necessarily software systems, but also systems that influencing the particular event flow, actually. Business rule, for instance, we arrived at craft. Whenever we are arriving at craft, we need to show our badge, for instance. We don't, but it's just for the sake of example. So that can be a business rule here.
Actually, when I came here yesterday, the lady at the gate was looking that way, and I walked past her, and she started shouting at me like, "Hey, you have to go and check in and stuff."
See?
So you can bypass business rules sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. I didn't show actually the badge to anyone the whole time, but yeah. So
Rule.
Rule, yeah, rule. Yes, so basically that's it. You are going to see a prepared event storming domain board for online grocery shopping domain.
Next slide.
Next slide. and we want you to get a bit more familiar with that. And for this, we asked some questions in terms of the domain, and you need to look through the entire prepared domain event storming domain in order to get some clues and to get some answers to these questions. So what we are going to do is, in a minute, we will show you the event storming board, and you are going to discover, deep dive into it a bit and basically try to answer these questions. You can do that physically on the post-its as well, so you don't need to use the online board for it. Also, the domain quiz technique, by the way, is a very useful one if you want to learn about or want to assess on what level are your teams with the domain knowledge. So, just trying to assess it, and also you can gain some knowledge on where your team's at in the domain, and basically what are the weakest points you need to improve, and these can influence, or these can basically pop up some very interesting conversations and very valuable conversations with your teams when you collaboratively discover the domain quiz results. So yeah, this is the event storming board we prepared for you.
So 12 minutes, 10 questions. Look at the event storm to find the answers to the questions and write the answers down on paper or post-its or any other creative way you
We
feel
are going
like.
to walk around, and any questions, we will be there. Also, that's why we said that you can read it from on your laptop, because this is too small, I guess.
And the timer has started, 12 minutes on the clock. Hello. Did anyone manage to answer all the questions?
Oh.
Okay. It doesn't really matter too much. It's just a good way to learn about the domain and the event storm and get your head into things so we can do something more interesting in the next activity, which will be
Pivotal events. So I hope you get the feeling how it is to work with an event storm. But now you are going to find pivotal events in the domain, actually, which means pivotal events are pretty much the signs for end of a process, sub-process, or also implying some kind of status changes, or can imply some status changes. So pretty much we are looking into big events, meaningful events in the domain here. Because these can be clues, or these are clues for finding boundaries later on for the activities. So within your team, you can discuss, looking for the pivotal events and discuss which are the pivotal events for you, which you feel like. And please, collect those on post-its or in Miro, however you feel like, or however you started to work with that.
I would just add a couple of things on the pivotal events. So the simple version is a pivotal event is something that signifies the end of a process or sub-process. And that's usually a good indicator for the boundaries. There's a bit more to it than that, but for today, if you follow that simple heuristic just to get started, that will help you start thinking about boundaries in the domain. And the second thing was, Zsófia mentioned you can do this on paper, but also if you're at a table, we've also made a copy of the event storm, and you can use that if you want to. So it's up to you if you want to be in person or on the Miro board. Any questions about that before I set a 10-minute timer? Is everything clear, or? No question? Okay, I'll set a timer. Have fun.
Thank you.
All right, time's up on that one, folks. Any questions? This time there has to be questions. Great. What's your question? That's a good question. Looking for the start is also quite useful as well. To keep things simple today, we said let's focus on the end, because that's normally a bit easier to spot. But yeah, looking for the start of processes, when something starts, usually something's ending before that anyway. It might not be in the software. But yeah, you can also look for the start. That's a good thing to do, in my opinion. All right, any other questions? Any questions down here?
Here?
Questions? No?
Here is a question.
Question.
There's some events which seem to have a boundary which there's a timeline. Hello, microphone. There's some places where the boundary seems a bit more unclear because there's post-its on the timeline which define end of one process, like delivery man comes and delivers the goods. Then there's a sticky note which indicates the customers received the goods, which seems to be some sort of boundary. But then there's also the process the delivery guy has to do after the delivery, doing the refund, recalls, returns, which seems to be a part of the same process, but not quite.
If I understand correctly, I think that's quite a common situation where you have branching and fan out. So one of the clues for pivotal events I didn't want to make things too complex with, but yeah, very often a pivotal event, when something ends, it can trigger multiple other processes, and sometimes they feed back in together, for example. So what was the question, sorry? I'll try and...
I think you pretty much touched on it.
Okay.
Yes.
One more thing on this, sorry, that you also shouldn't expect that to be that strict. So that's why I mentioned, yes, you should discuss that, because crunch that with your team, within your engineering teams, and with the business. So it's not that straightforward that here is a boundary and these are the pivotal events. Maybe you identified much different pivotal events than the other group, so like in the same domain. So that's totally makes sense. It's not strict.
All right. Any other questions? Question at the back.
Okay, I'm coming. Let's do this question and then that question, okay?
Can we have another question over here next, please, just to make him work? He's been sitting down there, so he needs some exercise.
Like the goal for finding those pivotal events is to find like boundaries in the system, or is it more an exercise to better understand the domain, or what do you think about that?
Well, I guess both of those things, but mostly it's about boundaries. Very, very often people will look at a business and say, oh, we've got like this domain and that domain and that domain from a very high level. But when you work at a high level, in any kind of design really, it's easy to fool yourself how simple something is and how obvious things are. With pivotal events, you're really getting into the process and looking for those points where exactly where the process finishes, deeper into the details, and you might discover something that way, like, oh, it's more complex than I thought. We've got a recovery process, or we've got things fanning out, or yeah, you might just discover things that you didn't realize before, and that as you zoom back out, you might think, oh, actually, thought the boundaries were here, and here, but having seen things in a bit more detail, maybe we've got a whole separate domain we didn't realize, just for when things go wrong, for example.
And also these things are the basis and inputs for identifying the boundaries or finding boundaries, and also organizing your engineering teams based on something. So like these are all the basis for that, and we will build on it.
Would you say that there is also some like social interaction around this point? So if you do real event storming and there are a couple of people and multiple like departments act in the same area, is that an indicator that there might be a pivotal event?
Yeah, so I've got another slide which isn't in here, which contains more examples and basically a handover between people.
Don't want to like step ahead if that
No,
comes
it's
later.
fine. Now you've done the basic bit. I think it's fine to talk in a bit more example. I would say with pivotal events there aren't any real hard and fast rules, but I would say whenever there's a handover between people or roles, that's usually a clue that something significant's happened there, like this person with this responsibility has performed a job or task that they needed to get done, and now it's moving on to this person who has a different responsibility. And because those people have different responsibilities, different purposes, it's likely that the business concepts are different in some way. But the question is always, are those two roles and the knowledge they have and the jobs they're doing different enough to be a separate domain? So a handover between two people doesn't always mean it's pivotal or at the end of something, but it's often a clue.
Yep. Actually, thanks for answering my question. So I had the same similar question. Like, what if we have two different opinions that there's some specific event will be a pivotal for one from different perspectives, different people have different opinions. So as I understood, you just have to communicate pretty well, and there might be different opportunities to discuss, and maybe even different threats that can come up after this discussion. So, yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Shall I take that, or
If
do
you
wanna
have
take that?
any additional inputs, yeah, shoot it.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
I would say at this stage with the pivotal events, we're not looking to put something in stone. This is a pivotal event. For all of eternity, that will be a pivotal event, and everyone in the company will worship this pivotal event. It's really just a process of refinement. Starting to look for the pivotal events helps us to think in more detail about where things stop, where state transitions happen, where people pass on responsibilities. Really, the process of finding boundaries, you need to go through multiple steps. So this is really just the first. Let's have a look. Let's identify where some spots might be. Let's not get attached too early to boundaries. Let's just. So yeah, it's really just the starting point for further refinement and discussions. Anything to
Yep.
add on that, or?
That's what I meant previously as well. Yeah, you need to start somewhere, right?
All right. So what do we have next? We have 2 seconds.
We got a heart on the board.
Still working on this in-person Miro thing.
By the way, do we have anyone joined online to the workshop? Do you know? I mean, the Hopin platform. I mean, just out of curiosity.
Could you just scroll that along? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So what we're going to do next is basically, for 15 minutes, just look at slicing up. Technical issue. That's. I'm going to have to reload the board. Just 2 seconds.
But great, you can be part of experiencing this first experience with the online Miro board versus in-person audience.
All right, almost there. So it should be working now.
Yep.
Is that annoying, the cursors?
Yeah, because they hide the text sometimes.
Okay, I'll turn those off then. Actually, you need to do that on your machine, sorry.
Okay.
All right, so now you've thought about the pivotal events, what's coming next is to think about how you would slice up the domain. So sometimes the pivotal events might be quite useful, but sometimes they might not be on the boundary of things. So they're not a hard and fast rule. 2 ways you can do this, either on paper, just write down what you think might be a subdomain, give it a name, brief description, and maybe talk about the start and end events. And also, this example here presents a simplified view where all the domains are nice and clean and everything fits together, but you might find in reality that's not always the case, so do watch out for that. Any questions before we set a timer on this one?
Thanks. You said this one is a simplified one. I'm just interested how real life subdomain image looks like. Is it very clumsy, or how should I imagine it?
Let's talk about that later. You have a go yourself, and then we'll get to that later. All right, so I'll set a timer for 15 minutes. All right, time's up on that one. Hope you had some interesting discussions. We're getting close to the end of the session today, so we don't have too much time to reflect on that activity. Today's session was kind of a quick run through the different activities involved, just to show you the kind of process we recommend doing in a real-life situation. So the final step in the final 10 or 15 minutes we've got available is now taking those boundaries you identified on the event storm. Now, thinking about an event storm, it's quite high level, it's quite abstract. There's a lot of details missing from there, so I would never recommend going straight from an event storm to architecture and team boundaries because there's too much information missing. It's a great starting point, but we still need to refine our designs first. And one of those steps is thinking about, do these boundaries make sense from an organizational perspective? If we slice up an event storm into domains, and then we organize our teams around those domains, is that going to be a good idea? So very quickly, one of the tools out there, it's not a huge, overcomplicated thing, is independent service heuristics from Team Topologies. It's basically a list of questions you can ask. For each of the domains and subdomains you've identified, apply each of those questions, and that will help you to think about some of the details that aren't visible on the event storm. So one simple example is, I forgot the number now. Let me zoom in on that. I'm thinking of cognitive load. We've got a mixture of things here. We've got things like cognitive load is in there somewhere on the Teams aspect. So this domain looks good on the event storm. All the events between this one and this one seem to be cohesive, but is that too much work for a single team? So that's the cognitive load. What else have we got on here? So dependencies is an obvious one. So thinking about if we did go for these domain boundaries, whenever we're implementing a new piece of work, how much coupling will there be between different domains? If you went to Vladik's talk yesterday about coupling, all of those concepts are represented here. And we've also got things which are a bit more subjective down here, like impact and value. Thinking about, is it interesting for a team to work on? Will a team be motivated? Can you clearly identify the purpose of something? Can you measure the impact in an area? If not, then it might be an indication you've gone too granular as opposed to too big. So how are we doing for time? We've got just enough time to do 10 minutes of this. We've got an example pre-prepared for you. So in reality, you would apply this to all of your domains and subdomains. Going through all of these questions takes a very long time to do that. But what we've done for you here is prepared an example. So this is the add recipe ingredients team. You can read a bit here about the responsibilities they've got. Here's the subdomain they're responsible for. Here's the people in their team. Here's the tech they own. And here's some details about how the team works to set their goals and prioritize their work. So what you need to do now in your groups is to go through those independent service heuristics, apply them to this team. Based on what's here, make some educated guesses. For each question, does this look good or does the question contradict what's here? So is that clear? Any questions before we start the final activity for 10 minutes? Okay, so basically we've got a description of a team here, and we've got a list of independent service heuristics on the previous slide. For each heuristic, look at this team and say, does this heuristic indicate that this is a good team design, or does the heuristic suggest there's something wrong about this team? All right, was there a question there? I'm so desperate for questions. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes, and then we'll have a final recap at the end. All right, so that's it. That's the end of that very short 10 minutes. If you got past question 1, you're doing well. So there's a lot to go through here, and it does take time. As you get more comfortable with it, then these questions here just become a natural way of your thinking. Whenever you're looking at boundaries, these things will just naturally come into your mind. So it just takes a bit of practice, and it does take a lot of time to go through all of them. And sometimes to answer these questions, you need to use other techniques. For example, when looking at dependencies, one of the techniques we use is message flow modeling, where you go through use cases and you can see how different domains and subdomains are involved in fulfilling a particular use case. So yeah, the main thing was in this session just to get an idea of how these things fit together, how you can start with high-level event storm, gradually get into more specific, without becoming too attached to things early. Anything you want to add?
Basically, nothing now. I mean, maybe that this Miro board remains available for you. So feel free to jump into that, learn more, basically visit all the references there. Yeah. because I know that this 1.5 hours is basically enough for nothing in this context, especially. So.
All right, so I think we've got a few minutes left for any questions about anything we covered today.
I'm coming.
That's tricky.
Yes, sir.
Hello, microphone. I was wondering, compared to other defined processes to figure out stuff like this, such as Google Design Sprint, which is quite clearly scoped when it comes to time, running a process like this, is there some sort of outer border time-wise to running this, or is it just organically grows until it takes?
To be honest, it varies quite a lot. Sometimes we're looking on a scale of 3 months, like what's this company trying to achieve in the next 3 months? Let's have an event storming and focus on what's relevant to that. Sometimes companies are more in the, we're currently working in a project way, and we want to move towards autonomous teams aligned around domains, and that's going to be 2 years if you're lucky, 5 years in a typical large company to get to that stage. So what we're doing in that level is probably having some high-level sessions and looking at when you get to larger companies, you're not just looking at individual domains, you're looking at clusters at different levels, like subdomains, domains, or different levels of the portfolio, if you're into business capabilities like level 3, 2, and 1, for example. And that's about balancing, having an idea of what the long term looks like and also the short term. And very often in that scenario, when a company's doing something big, like from project to product, there's also a lot of the cultural aspects that change. Things in here like the funding model sometimes need to be changed. If you're moving to something like you build it, you run it, testing needs to come into the team and deployment comes into the team. So in a situation like that, company might have a big 5-year vision of moving to autonomous product line teams, but you need to start small with experiments. So yeah, you probably would have a high-level event storm and then zoom into a particular area in more detail. So yeah, we've got a session next week with a bank in the UK, and we're looking at two particular domains. And I guess that's largely driven by, I would guess the main aspect is the people responsible for that area of the company are interested in doing this, whereas other areas of the company aren't doing this. So there's a lot of different factors that can affect the scope, but I do think these are generally quite applicable techniques to all those situations. So yeah, it's really about defining the scope, I think. All right, any other questions? We have a question on Slido.
We have one question on Slido. Shall we bring it up?
Oh.
Not a question, but this event helped me to understand what DDD really means, which I had struggled with. Thank you for having this online as well. Well, isn't that lovely?
Thank you.
Cool. That's our goal here, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the goal for today was to be light on theory and to show you how these different practical things can fit together. And hopefully that's given you enough to see what this might look like in a real situation. You can try it further. There's some links on the Miro board to find out about these techniques. During the pandemic, we got a bit bored of not being able to come to conferences, so we created like a starter modeling process. So if you're new to domain-driven design and you want to see how these various techniques can fit together, there's a link on the Miro board for that. And it gives you kind of a step-by-step, do this, and then this activity. It's not intended to be an experts thing, but for getting started, we think it's quite useful. You can't unhide that, so I'm just going to watch you struggle.
So you need to open the Miro board for this.
Yeah, I will unlock that frame if we get one more question to end this session. Question?
Nice and close, thank you.
Not that they're like definitive right and wrong answers, but I'd be curious about any of the insights that you had as to issues with that hypothetical API team that was responsible for adding ingredients to a cart.
Add recipe ingredients. So yeah, I picked that one because it sounds a bit too small, right? Just adding the recipe ingredients. So the natural inclination is, no, I think anyone who's got experience with this and looking at services would think that's a bit too granular. There are probably other things related to that which will be changing together. But I had a nice discussion over here, and what we talked about was it looks too small now, but that's just what we're looking at here is a snapshot of the team. I did unhide that, but there's a glitch. Basically, what we're looking at here is a snapshot of the team. That could be an MVP team, and there could be a 2 or 3 year vision of if this adding ingredients to the cart works well, there's a bunch of other stuff that we're planning to do, like I think you said integrating with other shopping carts. So I would say it is too small, but there might be information that's not here that would justify having that. It could also be that it's a company on a journey from monolith to microservices, and they're trying to figure out, where do we start pulling this big system apart? Add recipe ingredients seems a bit small, but it might be a safe area where we can start experimenting with moving to the cloud, microservices, some new tech, and it's quite safe to fail in that area. So yeah, in general, it looks quite small, but there might be other factors that would justify having a team that small. And it could be, if you went to Vladik's session yesterday, he also talked about velocity coupling. It might be that the add recipe ingredients is coupled to a bunch of other things, but if you look at the roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months, actually, there's no velocity of changes there. Those things won't be changing together. So the coupling's there, it's just not a problem. So there could be reasons for that, but yeah, if I saw that, I would be like, that's too small, need to find a good reason, otherwise probably doesn't make sense. Thanks for the question. I'll unhide the frames now, and thank you all for coming. Anything final from you?
Maybe also wanted to mention that if you are located in Hungary, near Budapest, for instance, you can come to my meetup, Domain-Driven Design Hungary, and that's where we actually, or I restart the meetup after COVID, right? That's where we are actually experiencing these kind of things. So you can come and just try out Event Storm, try out Wordly Mapping, try out anything that's basically advertised for the meetup. So I would be very happy to see you there. Yeah, so we can play more with these cards there.
Big hand for Nick and Zsófia, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.